program this week, we're going to be talking about health and energy. Basically, it's a case of get off your motorbike and get onto a push cycle, because I think you'll find it is actually very beneficial. We're also going to be looking at a seed vault and why that is important. Looking now at the things that are being talked about over this week, $7.85 million has been granted by the government to clean up Lake Ellesmere, and also the Hinds River in Central Plains gets $6.64 handout from the government. Calls also for 4 non-farmers to go onto the Fonterra board, and it's interesting that the Japanese have suddenly discovered New Zealand merino wool. The Australian Ministers of Agriculture are over here to find out what we're doing and how we're doing it. And also the Chatham Rock Phosphate Company have got a share issue trying to find, or to build up to, $600,000. Better monitoring of the fishing boats has been promised by the government, as is support for water storage. They can see apparently the need for water storage, so they're going to put some money up, and fast track applications, which will be interesting. Gypsy Day, of course, is looming very, very large, and also the Mount Cook station has been sold, or hasn't it been sold? It seems now that the government, or somebody or other, are saying that the new buyers can't take possession. In the meantime, on the dairy front, a bit of positive news. Westland Milk have opened up another niche market into China. They're now selling whipped cream. Niche is definitely the word. In just a moment, though, we're going to be talking Rural Women, New Zealand. Margaret, 4 points. We've covered 3 already. Can you just recap on the first 3?
Well, yes, the 4 strands for Rural Women New Zealand is first of all, is the social side of it, which is very important. And these days it is, because of the isolation that our rural women are experiencing with the downturn. Educational opportunities is the second one. And then we have our fundraising or charity side of the organisation.
So number 4.
Number 4 is another big one for us, which is our advocacy. And that's one that we have been promoting and working on for 90 years. Promoting advocacy for our rural women, our rural children, and for our rural communities. We focus on education, health, social issues and land use issues. We leave the business of farming to federated farmers, and we focus on those four main areas. And there's, I mean, you might think that we've sort of covered everything over the 90 years, but they keep coming back, and we have to readdress them and look at them every so often.
Well, there's a different generation coming in.
Yes, very much so. And new issues coming up, a new way of doing things and thinking about things. And we just have to keep the government on their toes to make sure they always consider the rural aspect of things and any policies or anything they look at bringing in. We have been very strong in the last, I suppose 8 years ago, we really got onto them and said you've got to have a rural impact assessment tool to be able to put a rural lens over any policies that you do put forward to make sure they're not going to adversely affect rural. They might be great policies, but have you thought about how they might adversely affect rural? And that's very important. So we hope that all the ministries now do this and cover this when they're looking at any new policies.
It must be very exciting for you as an organisation to be able to be political and knock down doors and walk into rooms.
Oh yes, and we you know, over the years we've built up, and we're well respected now for our well thought out submissions and things that we do. We you know, identify the problem, but we also identify 1 or 2 ways you could address it. Because, as we all know, governments are probably fairly short on new ideas and ways of solving some of these problems.
I was having a wee jest there, but you did right.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a very good thing to be able to say, well, this is the problem, these are what we see as solutions.
That's right, and that's what we always like to do. And that's, I think, why we have always been well respected, because we don't just go in and hammer them and say, give all the negative stuff. We like to be positive as well and look at ways of addressing some of these issues. So,
and new people who want to be part of that decision making and
yes, well, we're always looking to be a credible, you know, to give a credible voice to it. We always need to have people, grassroots people who can come on, and we've got lots of ways that they, you know, we have but people can do it by becoming members and doing it all by email now. It's so much easier than it used to be.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just and you know, we do like to have surveys, but we do need to have people to be that credible voice. We need to have the people at the grassroots level, you know, helping us with these submissions.
And you can be as involved or not involved as you want.
Exactly. Yes, and you know, some people like to do the advocacy side of it. That's where their interest is. Some like just the social side of it, and some like, you know, educational opportunities, and that's a very important one.
I think the role of women in agriculture has changed dramatically in the last few decades.
It has, yes, and we're very much more involved in the farming side of it. I mean, I look back to my mother-in-law, and she, you know, made scones and made the cups of tea for the people that came in, but never went to the accountant. And now we're involved, whether we do the finances or we're out actually physically working on the farm. We're very much, it's a partnership.
Absolutely.
Very, very much involved with it.
And anybody who's having anything to do with farming as a business, or farmers, ignores the women at their own peril, don't they?
They do now, yes. The odd one that still rings up and asks to talk to the boss.
Yeah, it's a very short conversation,
It was a
Margaret.
very short conversation. But that's, yes, things are changing.
I think that's very, very important. And you know, quite frankly, it's the old story of the farmer will say, I really want that tractor. And his wife will say, do you need it or do you want it? So it's keeping his feet on the ground a fair bit.
Yes, and as I say, you know, the wife or the partner is often the one doing the finances now, doing the box, and they know exactly how everything's going.
And the farmers probably just sweep everything under the carpet as a bloke, I mean.
Yes, well, they're busy doing the physical side of farming, and they just see that side of it and want to keep on with that. That's how I've seen it.
So where to from here? Onwards and upwards for...
Onwards and upwards, yes. Well, as far as our advocacy role, we're still very, you know, there's lots of things coming up. We've been doing a tertiary education, you know, submission on discussion document there, and freshwater, and, you know, there's freedom camping, which is a big issue. We want to, you know, and that's in the rural areas. That's certainly something we have to do. It's equity of access to things like health and education, connectivity. You know, we've still got a lot of our rural people have not got good internet access. You know, while we don't really, they probably don't want it for the fast films and all that sort of thing. They do need it for business and for their kids' education. You know, kids now have to, you know, look up the internet for homework projects, and you've got to have internet access for that.
Whether you like it or not, Margaret.
Whether we like it.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Just a moment, we're going to be looking at why you should get off your motorbike and get onto your push bike. Catherine, the humble bicycle is rejuvenating part of our rural scene.
Absolutely, yes. We have things like rail trails going through central Otago is a really good example. The Otago Rail Trail has really rejuvenated the local economy by tourism. So we have people coming to New Zealand, especially the South Island. They want to see some of the beautiful areas that we have, and they mostly choose to do that by bicycle. So by opening up farms, sometimes it's private land, sometimes it's adjacent to the farm. We have these rail trails. Here in Selwyn, we have the Little River Rail Trail, which many farmers have opened up to enable people to ride their bicycles through.
And of course there's accommodation needed on some occasions.
So many people might want to, if they do a longer trip, they might want to stay overnight. So many times the farmers can open up their place for accommodation. They can look at making different types of products for people, such as soap or honey, or having some fruits and vegetables for sale, which is a great thing when you're on a bicycle.
That leads us on to farmers markets.
Yes, the farmers market, really shopping locally, shopping where you know actually the farmer who you're buying from, is a great thing to do on a bicycle, because what you can do is you have your basket, you show up to the farmer's market, you talk with your farmer, you buy your fruits and vegetables and any other things they might have for sale. So it's a great way to bring back that local community and have a social interaction as well.
Your area of expertise is actually health to make wealth.
Yes, health into wealth is a great way of putting it. So the bicycle, using it as not only recreational, obviously we have health benefits there, but as a form of transportation. So again, the farmer's market, actually thinking of the farmer's market as the pharmacy. This is where you can get very healthy fruits and vegetables that you put back into your body, and that can all be done with the bicycle.
Are we ready as a nation to put away the motorbikes and dust off and get out the push cycles for our farmers?
So I have spoken with some farmers about this. Really putting aside the motorized bike is a great way, and dusting off the push bike is a great way to build exercise into your daily life and still accomplish those tasks that need to be done and getting places quickly. So I highly advise getting on the bicycle, and it's a good way. You'll notice after a few days of doing it, actually, you'll even enjoy it a bit more, and you'll be able to take notice to some of the things that maybe you zoomed right by in past. I've spoken with someone who's noticed a water leak because they were really connected to the land more so than just driving past, and he said he's not sure how long that's been going on.
You are really very health focused, aren't you?
Yes, for me, health is really happiness. So if you can reach a level of health that you enjoy, you get around quite easily, you're mobile, things are functioning, you can live a fairly happy life. So
now, what are these bicycles that are behind us?
So this is the Lincoln University Bike Share. So currently we have 3 bikes, and what you can do is there's an app called it's Next Bike, and what you do is you sign up for that, and you can come type in the number and get the bike out for up to 2 hours. So if you need to run into town and have a cuppa with a colleague or go get groceries, they have baskets. There's 3 gears on there, so it's very easy. You can also use them for fitness because the Lincoln branch here is available for 2 hours, whereas the ones in the city are available for 30 minutes for free.
Is bicycling becoming sexy?
Yes, actually, I would say we're on to something there, and sexy from the perspective not that you're wearing Lycra, but really that you can ride in a dress if you want. They say there's a group called Frocks on Bikes, and they're cruising around town in skirts and normal clothing. You can wear just jeans, whatever you want, and it's something that's for everyone.
What I was actually meaning was people really enjoying it.
People are enjoying it. It's really, if you think about the first time in your life that you've ever experienced freedom, there's a good chance it was on a bicycle. So to bring people back to that for me, really makes me happy.
Well, makes sense really, doesn't it? Because we are a bit inclined to sit in vehicles far too much. Straight after the break, we're going to be talking farm accounting.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Kerry, livestock values are out.
Yeah, IRD have just come out and released the herd scheme values, which is basically a snapshot of what the market value of livestock is around the whole of New Zealand, and it's used by accountants to value livestock at the end of the year. No real surprises in it. Sheep have barely moved in terms of their values. Beef cattle's well up. The deer were really up quite a bit, up to about 30-odd% in some cases. And poor old dairy, well, they're down sort of 20-30% as well, with a mixed age cow around about $1,350 is their average value now. So they've come back about $200 since last year.
About 20 to 30%.
Yeah, so it's a big drop.
It is a big drop.
And so
but it's expected, though, I would have
Well,
thought.
yeah, that was expected. We knew the market was going to be down. This is sort of, in the season this happened. Next year, we'll see how it goes. It might be down again because, a lot of livestock's going to come up for sale in the next wee while, potentially. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the books end up like for a lot of people using these values.
Yeah, no, it will be.
Yeah.
Speaking of Gypsy Day, which isn't very far away, have you noticed anything coming out of the woodwork?
No, everything's sort of reasonably quiet. There's a lot of deals going on behind the scenes is what I'd say.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of work put in by accountants and bankers up and down the country. Last week I had a full sit down with a banker for one farmer and basically almost got a deal on the table for him. So he'll be staying where he is. We've had a share milker who's decided they're going to give up and share milk and actually just go back as an employee on a dairy farm. So they're
Keeping it simple.
Yeah, they're moving away from that and into just paid employment because it's guaranteed money for them.
Yeah, and they know exactly where they are.
Yeah. And they're a young couple and they're like, well, we just can't hang it anymore.
Yeah.
We just want to get that paid income.
Because it could have been a bit turmolic out there.
Yeah, it could have. But I think most of it's sort of, a lot of people have come to the realisation that they've got to get in there and just help them out.
No, that's excellent news. Now, there's been a bit of a survey on IRD and online.
Yeah, there's been a survey put out where a lot of people surveyed about how they've been using online, the attitudes towards IRD, etc. with it. And 57% of people have come out and said, yep, we've been using the online option for filing tax returns and making tax payments. But only a third of them are actually happy using it, purely because they wanted the real person contact. They don't like the idea of actually going online, filing on a computer and not knowing what's happening at the other end. They really wanted to talk to someone to know that it's done, received, that the tax payment's gone to the right place.
Because when you push that button...
You've just got to rely on the fact that it gets through, and it doesn't always. So that was quite an interesting one that's come out. And on the other side of it, only about 11% of it would be happy for IRD to have any access to their data. And of course, the push is for IRD to sort of read your data directly so you can get up to date with your tax, etc. Which means that IRD have got to come back and have a good look at what they're doing because that online is where they're heading, but people don't necessarily want it or like it.
Yeah, well, the banks went all sort of, we don't want to see you, didn't they? But
now they're coming back the other way and
they
putting
are.
more managers on the road, etc. It'll be interesting to see what IRD does. They're going to still push for that online, but I think we'll probably see a lot more what they call their compliance or community officers out there, just visiting people and having a bit of a chat and that sort of thing.
I've come across a couple of them, and they're very, very human people.
Yeah, well, they're fantastic people. And we say to all our new clients that come on board, if IRD say, look, you want us to come out and have a sit down and just talk through your tax obligations, take advantage of it. Because they're there, it's free, it's, you take it with a grain of salt sometimes what they say, because they can be a bit over the top, but they do have some good ideas and just sort of keep you aware of where you're at.
And it's the other thing is, you gives a balance to the chartered accountant.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It just shows that, what we're saying is right as well. It can raise some other questions. They might say, one thing they can ask us and we can give them a bit of a follow-up as well. So, it's a good thing to have those people out there.
Now, farm accommodation.
Yeah, just a couple of things that we've noticed recently, people not quite doing what they're supposed to do. They've got to realise there's a couple of bits of Act that actually sort of apply to these houses. So you've got your Residential Tenancy Act and you've got your Health and Safety Act as well, all the regulations. And a lot of farmers don't think about those when they do, accommodation for their staff. So under the residential tenancy one, you've got to make sure you've had a written rental agreement, for example. A lot of them just put the staff member on and say, okay, here's a house, I'm going to charge you whatever.
There's the key to the front door.
Yep, exactly. But under the Residential Tenancy Act, you're supposed to actually have a proper agreement that says, what the rent is, who the parties are, the property, etc. So it's just that. But the other one, of course, the health and safety. You've got to make sure you've got all the right things in there. So you've got your sleeping, your lighting, your ventilation, your washing facilities, all those sort of things. You've got to make sure they're up to scratch as well, because you've got obligations there to fulfil.
It's getting complicated.
It is complicated, yeah. A lot of people just want to ignore it, but it's got to the point where you can't anymore. Especially with the recent health and safety changes, you really got to be on top of it. Not just on the farm, but now also this side of it.
And people come out and check, no doubt.
Yeah, they can do, yep. I was listening to the radio yesterday and there was an example of someone said they had a couple of people out and they realised straight away that they're in trouble with health and safety because the house wasn't up to scratch. There were holes in the floorboards, etc. And so they just sort of basically did a bit of a patch-up job.
Yeah,
but the farmer
I can
was
understand
just,
them getting...
Yeah, but he was like, well, that's just the way the house is. It's old. Why would I put money into it? Well, you can't take that attitude. You've actually got to make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, indeed. Kerry, thank you very much. Indeed, you are full of great information. In just a moment, we're going to be looking at the International Seed Vault, what it is and why we need it. Brian, who or what is the Seed Vault?
The Svalbard Global Seed Vault is the backup to the global system of conservation of crop diversity. It is where collections go to make sure that their collections are safe in the future. So they make a safety backup, like a safety deposit box in a bank.
So, Brian, who's funding it?
The Seed Vault was built and funded by the Norwegian government in 2008. The annual operating costs of the Seed Vault are provided by the Crop Trust and the Norwegian government. The work of maintaining the collection is managed by the Nordic Gene Bank, Nordgen.
Did they come up with the idea?
A long time ago, the Nordic Gene Bank actually stored their crop collection in an abandoned cave mine up in Svalbard. The idea of conserving and backing up diversity has been around for 100 or so years, even more. And this concept of the Seed Vault was thought about by many people, but the reason why the Seed Vault in Longyearbyen now exists is because of a man named Kerry Fowler. He was the director of the Crop Trust, and he recognized that we needed this backup. And so he approached the Norwegian government to create this Seed Vault in Norway, and that's how it all started.
Who's the Crop Trust?
The Crop Trust is an international organization working to conserve crop diversity worldwide. We are working to create and fund a global system for the conservation of crop diversity in crop collections worldwide.
Now, an interesting thing, but why was Norway chosen?
Svalbard is an interesting choice for the location of the vault, and it has many reasons as to why it's there. One being that there is this Svalbard Treaty, which allows for anybody to basically be in the area, meaning that you can have seeds from North Korea and South Korea on the same shelf. Other reasons include the fact that it's cold. It's the farthest north you can fly in a commercial airline. And in the permafrost, in the mountain, you have a consistent temperature of -7 degrees Celsius. The optimal storage conditions for seeds for long-term conservation is -18 degrees Celsius. So you already have a degree of cold that you don't have to bring down through artificial cold, which makes it a good place to do that in comparison to a +40 degree weather in the Philippines.
Having picked the ideal spot, how do you actually choose the seeds that you're going to store?
Around the world, there are about 1,750 collections of crop diversity. Not all of them contain unique varieties. These collections contain about 7 million varieties, but only 2 to 2.5 of these are unique. So the Seed Vault is meant to store the unique diversity of crops. So in order to deposit to the Seed Vaults, collections are required to deposit unique varieties. And these crops are only for food security.
So it's only agricultural crops?
There is one box in the Seed Vault that contains flora and fauna, and that is from the local Svalbard area. The rest of the collection in the Seed Vault is for agricultural crops.
Why one box?
The one box of flora and fauna from Svalbard was chosen as a consideration for the fact that the seed vault is located on this far northern archipelago in Longyearbyen. And it was a collection that the university put together, and it was kind of a symbolic representation of diversity and life in Svalbard.
How up to date are you as far as the vault is concerned?
The seed vault gets deposits from collections 3 times a year, and currently contains more than 830,000 different samples. Obviously, we would like to get it to the full 2 to 2.5 unique varieties in the world, but that's a long process.
Now, the varieties, you've got some basic ones like rice, I guess, but what about, is there anything sort of GM?
So I'll start with the rice question. In the world, there are about 200,000 varieties of rice. These are all unique varieties, and the majority of them are stored inside the seed vaults. The seed vault contains this natural diversity from across the world, about 830,000, 40,000 varieties. Norwegian law prohibits GM crops and food from entering their borders. So likewise, the seed vault does not allow GM crops.
Any withdrawals been made from the bank so far?
In 2015, we saw the first seed retrieval from the seed vaults. This was a collection called the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, and they held their collection in Aleppo, Syria. Because of the civil strife, the collection was not able to maintain the work required of it. Collections in the world are not only meant to hold as a backup, but they're actually meant to work with scientists and breeders. They're meant to send and share the material so that we can improve agriculture for the future. They were unable in the conditions in Aleppo, Syria now, or in the past 5 years, to really do their job as effectively as possible. Now, they were doing a great job. They were still sending out shipments of seeds, with war going on. But it wasn't optimal. And so ICARDA decided that it was time for them to reestablish their collection in a different country that they can more safely resume their activities. So in September of 2015, they received about 38,000 varieties from the seed vault that they had deposited, because only those who deposit can retrieve their seeds, and brought them to Morocco and Lebanon to restart their collection.
Is it a concern that there has been a withdrawal?
Of course, we don't want that to happen. We don't want seeds to be withdrawn because it means something's bad happened in the world. But it proves the point that the seed vaults exist for a reason, and we need it. And it proves the point that this work is extremely important. And before the seed vaults, this work didn't get the credit it deserved. People are working on a daily basis to make sure that the food on your plate remains into the future. And the seed vault provides that safety net.
What role do you see for the future?
So the collections around the world are doing the actual work on a day-to-day basis. They're working with scientists and breeders to develop new crops. But as shown in Syria, things can happen. There are natural disasters, there's war, anything could happen to these collections. And the seed vault is integral in making sure that we don't lose these options for the future. Each single seed might provide a trait that can be used to adapt to a new condition, whether it's a pest and disease, drought, climate change, anything. And the seed vault provides this backup for our food security system.
So what's the Crop Trust involvement?
The Crop Trust is working to create this global system and fund it. We were built in 2004 to establish an endowment fund that would provide the necessary funding that these collections around the world need on a yearly basis. Because something as simple as a power outage or not paying the electricity bill can result in the loss of diversity and an extinction event. So our job is to make sure that these collections are secure. So we are working to raise money to do this. We're very happy that just this year, New Zealand made an announcement, a pledge of $2 million New Zealand dollars to the endowment. And we're working with countries around the world to raise that endowment fund.
Has New Zealand actually made a contribution as yet?
We will have a deposit to the Svalbard Global Seed Vaults on Monday, the 23rd of May. It will become the first deposit by New Zealand. The Margot Ford Germplasm Center we'll deposit around 700 varieties of crops. Clover and ryegrass will be deposited by New Zealand. So we're very excited to welcome the first deposit by New Zealand.
So apart from Norway and New Zealand, what other countries are involved, if any?
As of right now, we have 66 different institutions that have deposited into the seed vaults. We'd obviously like that number to grow, but that's at times difficult. We require funding, political interference can occur, but the seeds in the seed vault have originated from every single country in the world. So we're getting there.
What else is the Crop Trust involved in?
While the Crop Trust is building this global system and working to manage and fund many of these collections around the world, we're also working to fill the gaps in the global system. There are crops growing in the wild in natural conditions without human influence that are the wild cousins of what is grown in our fields today. These crop wild relatives contain hardy traits that we can use to adapt our agriculture to the conditions we face in the future. So through a 10-year commitment from the Norwegian government, we are collecting, conserving, and using these crop wild relatives to improve our agriculture. And we're very excited about this. We have collecting agreements with nearly 20 countries, and we will be going out over the next 2 years and collecting this diversity, storing them in collections, eventually backing them up in the seed vaults, but also providing them to breeders so that they can use them to improve agriculture, to improve the crops that we have in our fields today against the rising temperatures, pests and diseases, which these crops in the wild naturally are protecting against.
What about the United Nations? Do they have a role as far as the whole diversity is concerned?
The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals actually have a target in there in Goal 2 of ending hunger. 2.5 says by 2020, we should conserve the diversity and wild diversity of crops in the gene banks in the world, international, national, and regional collections. So this is a very good indication that the governments of the world recognize the importance of crop diversity and recognize the importance of using this diversity to adapt our agriculture and be able to feed our future despite climate change and despite the challenges of a rising population.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Dennis, a bit of rain, that would have helped.
Absolutely, Rob. It's transformed things from dust to mud, and
That's a good way of putting it.
it is, that's great. But certainly the air is fresh and clean, and the mornings are crisp, and people are feeling sort of invigorated, really. But it'll be very beneficial for some of those crops that have been sown that the ground hadn't been irrigated, for them to strike. Very beneficial for residual herbicides to be put on. They'll actually work now with a bit of moisture. And of course it'll do things like strike barley grass.
Striped barley grass.
Striped barley grass,
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
on the negative side.
Well, the other thing is seriously that the ground temperatures are going to plummet if we start getting a bit more cold weather.
Absolutely. I think we can't expect to see a lot of growth from this, although some crops that are winter active, like triticale, rye corn, oats and things like that, and the brassica families, they will still grow in the cooler temperatures, but it's a bit late for the old grass and clover. There won't be much happening on that front.
No, exactly. Nitrate poisoning will be the thing to look out for.
Could be if we get some sort of Indian summertime with rapid growth and the nitrogen will concentrate in that new growth end. Yes, just watch that. Indeed.
Now, what's the story with Montana and Bayer?
Sorry, Monsanto and Bayer?
Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
Yes. Bayer is a huge corporate, of course, and so is Monsanto. Well, they're probably feeling a bit miffed, Monsanto. They missed out on Syngenta. That went to Chem China for $43 billion US.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money. Big global company now. And of course, Bayer and Monsanto are having a chat about possible acquisition and what have you, and hasn't gone any further than having a chat. But it's interesting to see that two giants on the agricultural side and the chemical side are talking again and looking at, I guess, economies of scale, but even it's becoming sort of a few big boys at the top. We've seen it before in other industries, and then there's a lot of fallout and a lot of smaller ones develop, and it goes in cycles. But this could be potentially absolutely huge for the global seed supplies and chemical supplies if Monsanto and Bayer do get together. It's only early days yet at this stage, but they're chatting.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be a huge monolith.
Absolutely, absolutely huge.
What's the Canadian finding that could be affecting everybody?
Yeah, quite exciting. A bit of GE, I guess, and the Canadians have, with conventional breeding, go back to conventional breeding, the incremental gains are in sort of 1 and 2 and 3% per year. There was an accidental discovery in Canada where they put some corn enzymes in with some starch, and just looking at some basic science and seeing if it still worked, and found that some of the plants that they were working with doubled in size, but increased their seed yield by up to 400%.
Really?
Yes, absolutely amazing. And even if you say, well, that's in the laboratory, out in the field it might be 200%.
Even so.
That is absolutely phenomenal. And crops like canola, the potential is just huge for the oils and the diesels and things like that, if they can get those sorts of responses. In the past, they've had the plant size, but the seed production has never gone along with it, and so this is the different one.
Exactly.
And,
Aphids.
Yes, as you can imagine, with our warm, very warm autumn, almost Indian summer into the winter, aphid numbers were absolutely huge out there, and so any of those very early sown wheat crops where the insecticide protection is in the seed would have worn off and probably vulnerable, and there'll be a lot of aphid in those crops now, which can transmit barley yellow dwarf virus, of course. So a very timely insecticide for those early ones over the top now could be of benefit. The old boys used to say, don't plant wheat if it comes up before the shortest day. Therefore, the aphid numbers have gone down because of the cold and the pressure's not there. Also, the septoria spores that come in from the ear, basically they're raining in now. They slow down and sort of almost stop going into the crop by the middle of June or late June. And so the old boys used to graze those crops with sheep, eat the leaves off that carry the aphid and the septoria. So,
They're very wise. Very briefly, there's a new ugly thing arrived.
yes, the pea weevil, which is a new pest that's come into the country. It's been found in the Wairarapa, and of course a lot of garden pea seed is produced in the Wairarapa and potentially used down here in Canterbury with the likes of the Wattie's green pea crop. This little pest attacks the flowering pea crop, eats flowers, nectar, pollen, and infects the plant, goes through the grub stage and hatches into a weevil, and can sort of manifest itself in the seed and just sit there dormant for up to 2 years. Then it goes again, but it can fly 5Ks looking for flowering pea crops.
We just don't need it.
We don't need it.
No,
Just
exactly.
another threat that has slipped through the net.
Exactly, Dan. Welcome back, and thanks very much indeed. In just a moment, we're going to be talking to Kerry more about things that are on her plate. Kerry, Gypsy Day, we always think about the cattle and the shear milkers and everybody else, but we don't think about the children.
No, that's right. I mean, like you say, at Gypsy Day at this time of year, there's lots of trucks on the road and cattle everywhere and furniture removal, and everyone's focused on shifting house, and somewhere in the midst of all that are the children. And for them, it's actually a huge upheaval. You know, they're moving house. Many of them are changing schools, and the moving house is a challenge because, you know, they might have had a room to themselves. Now they've got to share. It's a different house, different environment, people to get used to. And school's another issue. Again, leaving friends, trying to make new friends, settle into a new environment, new teachers, different ways of doing things, new uniforms. Everything's changing for them. So it's a very insecure and unsettling time for a child. We also know statistically that when a child changes school, they lose that first term of learning, and that's all about settling in, the grief of having moved from where they were and lost those friends, getting to know new friends, re-establishing with a new teacher, the teacher getting to know them and reassessing where they are up to academically. So they lose that term of learning, and that's actually quite a chunk out of their learning year, particularly relevant in those really early years when they're setting in place the building blocks of the reading, writing, arithmetic things, and they're having that interrupted. And so it can make a big difference to their outcome and how challenging it is for their learning in an ongoing way. And so at this time of year, they really need a lot of support with some of them with extra teacher aid hours to help them with that transition and get them through. So that, you know, it's smooth and seamless and they don't lose too much ground and have to catch up all the time. And for children who are moving every year or every 2 years, that's actually a big interruption to their education on an ongoing basis. So we've got to look at how we can support them better through the schools. And they do some amazing work, they really do. But as I said, they do need additional support. And also the children at the school that they've left, we always sort of think about the ones who are moving, but the children who don't move, they also have to transition. You know, they've lost friends and they've got new people coming in. So they've got those same grieving type processes as well. So it's a big change from the whole community.
And you're halfway through a year.
It is, you're halfway through, and particularly for older children who might be at intermediate or even high school age, that's actually a really huge issue when you're starting to work towards setting up for NCEA and you've suddenly changed in the midstream. So there's some big learning issues there.
Do we know whether the records of a child goes to the new school or not?
Yes, they do. But of course, the teacher has to take time to get to know the student and assess from their perspective where they're up to in terms of what they're doing with their class and how they, what extra needs to be done or where they kind of fit with the class. And so the children are going through a big upheaval. And for young children in particular, it's a really insecure time. And we see a lot of changes, and teachers and families often report changes in behaviour. And a lot of that's to do with the stress and the insecurity of the changes. And behavioural changes, it's things like they'll become bossy and bully, you know, they'll act out, they'll lash out because it's all, you know, their world's in upheaval, or they'll totally withdraw and become quite isolated within themselves. And we also see with very young children when they have that stress and tension, we have other issues, changes in eating patterns, changing in sleeping patterns, and for the very young, even changes in toileting. They'll start bedwetting, they'll go backwards with toilet training, and a lot of that is to do not with medical issues or they're just being naughty, but because it's their way of responding to the stress and tension, because as yet, as little people, they haven't learnt those coping mechanisms that perhaps you and I as adults might have developed.
Because you think of a school, and especially I guess with girls is more than boys, but they've got their little groups, they've got their best friends.
They have.
And how the hell do you break into that?
It's very, very hard. So there's certainly a grieving period for them. And so the children are needing a lot more support and reassurance. And also, you know, particularly in dairying, it's a difficult time at the moment with the downturn. And so there's the added stress and tension within the family already without moving house as well. And you know, so a lot of people are saying, you know, the children suddenly being naughty, or they're waking up in the middle of the night when they never used to. And a lot of that is actually related to stress and tension rather than poor behaviour. So whilst, you know, we're spending a lot of time focusing on keeping the business running and up and going and being financially sustainable, and we're working probably harder than we ever have, because we might be a staff member or two down so that we can make ends meet. We've actually got to remember that there's little people out there who need a lot more support and reassurance. And to try and keep things as normal as possible, try and keep those normal routines, because that normality provides them with their sense of security and stability, which helps them deal with the stresses, and so you can alleviate some of those behavioural issues.
But they're still having lunch on their own at school.
Yeah, so there's a lot of transition for them.
Oh, no, thank you, because we just don't think about that.
No, and I think a lot of people think about it, you know, the kids are being naughty and they're just playing up because we're moving, but it's actually more to do with the stress and tension. So we need to take that step back and look at the bigger picture and say, what's happening in this child's environment at the moment that's causing them pressure and stress that they're responding in a way we're not expecting.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. And that's interesting, because straight after the break we're going to be talking to John O'Malley about stress, and he'll have an opinion on that as well, I'm very, very sure.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
John, you're going to try to tell me that the stomach actually has a very strong connection to the brain.
Well, the stomach does, but it's actually probably more the small intestine that's doing the main stuff, Rob. The gut-brain connection, it's always been understood by naturopaths and homeopaths and to some extent chiropractors, but it's now becoming very part of mainstream medicine. I've just come back from Sydney yesterday after a 3-day seminar with the MIN Foundation, which is a predominantly medical but multidisciplinary foundation that pushes the most recent information on what's happening with autism. And the big thing they've been pushed in the last 2 years is the idea that an unhealthy gut sets up an unhealthy brain. And I mean, like one of the things that came out of this is a thing called helmet therapy. Now, you know, if you say helmets, most farmers are going, what, those things we drench for? And you go, yeah, that's right, that's them. But, you know, children are meant to live in dirt when they're little. And, you know, and some parents go, oh, God, I can't keep him out of the garden. He's constantly shoveling the stuff in. Don't worry about it. Just make sure there's no cat poo in there, you know, and you'll be fine. Because in fact that's the child inoculating themselves because they just feel like eating dirt, and they're inoculating themselves with the normal everyday bugs that their gut should have in there, and they're picking up a few parasites, and that is setting up a system where the whole thing balances and regulates properly. There's a type of white cell called an eosinophil, right? Now it turns up over here with asthma, eczema, hay fever, the atopic disorders, but it also turns up over here fighting parasites. And it's like having a whole army and all the fellas are sitting around going, no parasites, what do we do? Oh, let's go wreck some skin, create some asthma.
So, I mean, we drench against them, against parasites and
Well,
tails.
yeah, well, you see, then that's again, it's the whole complexity of ecosystems. Like sheep in the wild, or goats in the wild, right? They would have large herbivores with them too, and there'd be predators, and there'd be birds, right? And the birds are eating the poo and taking the eggs out, and the parasites out, and the dung beetles are burying it, and you know, there's this whole thing. But we put a monoculture in the form of a sheep, and a monoculture in the form of a paddock full of a certain type of ryegrass or clovers and maybe a bit of lucerne, right? And then you create a situation where what would be a balanced situation where the parasite loading is brought down by all the other beasties in the area, right? Where they're eating their own eggs and the parasite loading goes up. And people can get that too. But I would say to mothers out there, don't be overly keen on the old drenching them, you know, just change their diet a wee bit. Increase the green leafies, cut out the sugars and the carbohydrates, right, and they'll stop scratching their bum.
So actually sugars are something that people are getting very, very wary of now.
Sugar, they reckon, is as hard to give up as cocaine, right? And I've given up sugar, so I'm not going to start cocaine. It was very hard.
It was very hard, yes.
But they both fire up dopamine receptors in the brain. These are the things that make us feel happy. You know, happy receptors. So, you know, I feel depressed, what do I do? Bar of chocolate, feel good, and now I feel bad about the chocolate, so I'll have some more.
Some more chocolate.
So, yeah, but then see, the stuff goes into the gut, and the gut's brilliant. I mean, like, for instance, there are these bacteria in your gut associated with casein, right? And they do very well on milk, and we don't necessarily do that well on milk, not on lots of it anyway. And these bugs take the casein and convert them to casein opioids. And those opioids fire up opioid receptors in the brain, exactly the same way heroin does, or morphine does, right? And so, you know, the person goes, but I need cheese. And you go, of course you do. Shoot it up into your arm, you know.
You're not going to get me to give up cheese though, John.
That's what they say, Rob. And it's the same, you get gluten opioids as well. So the same thing is, so if you eat a whole lot of one food, you'll build a whole lot of that bug, and that bug will then actually regulate the environment so that you keep it fed. Clever stuff.
So what do we do? I mean, you've just come back from a seminar. What's the take-home message?
Remember that we talked about you live on the planet, beneath the skies, in the presence of mortals and before the divinities. Heidegger's idea of how you set up the good life, right? Well, let's just go back to beneath the skies, right? You go with the seasons. So eat what's in season. Vary your diet with the seasons, right? Eat a large range of foods, right? Don't go for anything in a cardboard packet. Right? That's not a good idea, or a plastic bag.
Because it's full of preservatives.
Well, it's full of preservatives. It's got high levels usually of carbohydrates and sugars, and these tend to feed the bad bugs. Some carbohydrate in your diet's great. You need a bit, right? But it's about balance. Balance is everything. It's about creating this ecosystem in there that's, what do you reckon the numbers are? How many bugs do you reckon you got in your gut?
Oh, there'll be lots and lots and lots.
About 100 trillion.
100 trillion?
100 trillion. There's a massive number, right? And so these are what, and the genetic diversity in your gut is about 30,000 times the genome of a person. So that's how much, and all that stuff's producing stuff, and we're utilising it. So a really good diverse gut flora, right, is producing all sorts of things that end up in your blood that your body uses. And if you eat grass, right, then you're going to end up with a monoculture and, you know, that sort of thing. Like, you know, I know from the West Coast, we used to stick some of these cattle we had and you'd chuck them out in the back blocks into a bit of parquet swamp, right? And you'd leave them and they'd come back as fully grown beasties and as healthy as hell. Mad, but healthy.
John, thank you very much indeed. Now, if you want to check up on a couple of things you said, you notice I was too scared to ask him about antibiotics. But if you do want to catch up on, we can always go to our website and have another look. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.